I know a lot of us have the pandemic in our rearview mirrors, but many industries are still reeling from its impact, especially those that were already surviving on razor thin margins. For example, the restaurant and service industry. Not only are they still recovering, they're also reckoning that their entire business model might be unsustainable. So today on CityCast Portland, we're talking with Katie Millard, chef and co-owner of the acclaimed neighborhood restaurant Coquine. And Katie's going to lay out all the unexpected ways her restaurant stayed resilient and got through the last few difficult years. And her choices might surprise you. It's Thursday, April 6th. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. So Katie, you signed a lease to expand your restaurant weeks before COVID hit, but plans change. And Coquine has had to deal with a lot of change and iterations to be what it is today. So can you tell us a bit more about the beginning vision of Coquine to where it is now?
Yeah, absolutely. I had the wonderful opportunity to live and work in France for 5 years. And one thing that I really missed when I came back, the fact that like in Paris, you walk out the doors of your apartment and you've got the bakery and the butcher and the fishmonger and a cafe, and you kind of have everything that you really need in your little walking area. And I just kind of wanted to to foster that and have that feeling and a sense of like neighborhood and community here in Portland. Now, the press was not in agreement.
Oh, because of your fine dining background, They were just like, here's a fancy lady opening up a fancy place.
Yeah.
Was it like that? And you're just like, no, neighborhood.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it went, actually.
Yeah.
So the press very much focused on my fine dining background. And I think people's expectations were that we were going to be a fine dining restaurant. And that, I believe, it kind of shot us in the foot a little bit out the gates because we were dealing with people's expectations versus what we actually meant to be and wanted to be. Like we didn't have a tasting menu when we opened because we didn't intend to be a tasting menu restaurant.
Yeah.
And people would build their own tasting menus around our prefix menu, and it just kind of turned into a big mess. And so we added a tasting menu just to make it neater, you know?
Gotcha, because you're just like, please don't eat that in that order. That's a smorgasbord of just too much there.
Or please don't order that much food. That's way too much food.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
There was, like you were stating, there was just a lot of expectations. Like, how were you able to shift people's, towards your vision? I mean, did the pandemic just do that for you?
Right. Well, what we intended to do was expand the restaurant, mainly build a bigger kitchen because our kitchen is minuscule, and like move our espresso machine around to a different side of like the counter, basically like build the bar to where the restaurant could still kind of be a restaurant, but then we could have the like neighborhood coffee shop vibe, but just in a different area. And, we had plans drawn, like I still have the plans drawn up. We never did it because COVID, shut everything down, made it really impossible for restaurants to get funding. And COVID gave us this opportunity. And well, I guess we took this opportunity a little bit more so with the parameters that COVID had presented us with. I hate the word pivot. It makes me cringe a lot, but
I'll say it for you. Okay. You pivoted.
Yeah. And started a CSA and selling groceries through our website. So basically everything that we had ordered for use in the restaurant, we started selling to the community, the neighborhood.
Like, what gave you that idea? Because most people, when they're drowning, they're looking for things to hang on to. And instead you were just like, let me float this, let me float that. It's such a different way of thinking. How did you arrive to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, our decision to do what we did was twofold. Number one, it was, well, how do we keep our staff employed? And number two, the community of farmers that we work with is the lifeblood of Coquine, and it always has been. A lot of them sell mainly or only to restaurants, or, even if they do go to a farmer's market, their lifeblood are big orders to restaurants or to produce companies, and not necessarily like a bunch of parsley at a time at a farmer's market. And, a lot of these people are my friends. And it originally started just with veggie bags. But then, I got a call from the cheesemonger being like, so I guess you don't need an order this week, and it was, I know. And it was like, it broke my heart. So I was like, well, what if, people would buy cheese, right? I would buy cheese, would they buy eggs? Would
cheese
they buy our
good.
Milk? Yeah. And, our lamb from our lamb guy, John Newmeister, who's just an angel human, like, all these people just, it all kind of flashed through through my mind, and I was like, well, we can help. And it worked. It worked really well. It worked so well that at first we couldn't keep up. Like it was a
Wow.
lot. It was a lot. The first 2 or 3 months were like we were selling, 350 veggie bags a week. But it really turned into a big side of our business. I mean, it's a solid half of our business to this day. And during COVID, it was 2/3 of our revenue was was veggies and groceries. The food we did to go was like a very small part of our revenue.
So how have your priorities changed over the past few years as a chef, having to go through the pandemic, having to go through the, reorganization of your restaurant into a market? Like,
Yeah, I think so. I mean, profoundly, my priorities have changed. So, we're put on these pedestals and there's awards and, lots of press around it and lots of noise and nonsense and expectations. And, and you kind of fall into that. You fall into it and you fall into this, realm of thinking that like those things are important and the awards are important and the press is important. And, to an extent, that's what makes or breaks your business sometimes, unfortunately. And, whereas we were, certainly trying to be this thing before COVID, after COVID, and since, it, for me, is so much more about our community, because our community is the only reason we're still here.
You know what I'm hearing though, Katie, is that your original vision is what happened.
Exactly.
Like everyone had to stop giving you the expectations. And I love that you're like, oh, we made it so I could say no. I'm like, I'm hearing a sustainable model is what I'm hearing. People lose their staff because they're not sustainable, because the vision is larger than the capacity of their staff, and it seems like you found like your sweet spot. But after all this, like what would it take for your operation? I wouldn't say restaurant because it's restaurant market. It's your community outpost. What would it take for it to thrive? I mean, do you feel you're there, or are you still planning more moves?
Well, I feel we're close. Honestly, staffing is a big issue right now. And I know it's not just me, and I certainly know it's not just restaurants. I know that this is a thing that so many people and so many industries and jobs are struggling with right now. But we have we've been short-staffed somewhere since May of 2021 when we reopened for in-person. And then a couple months later in July, we opened the market in person. I was working the cash register like 5 days a week,
Oh my God.
At first we only had 6 tables when we reopened because we couldn't hire servers. Now we are short-staffed in the kitchen. It kind of like rotates a little bit, but we're always kind of short-staffed. It's really hard to hire people right now.
What do you think that is? Because I keep hearing that, and since I'm not on the end of like hiring people, I just know a bunch of people who need jobs. So I'm wondering like what it is about. Is it the service industry in particular, or is it every sector? Like what is it?
I think it's a lot of things. I don't think there's a neat and tidy answer, unfortunately. I think there's a lot of things. I think there's a lot of people who stopped working during COVID, which takes a good chunk of workers out of the economy. And there are a lot of people that left the service industry. And I think a lot of people left the service industry because it's not traditionally a very sustainable way to live. And, and I'm trying to change that. I'm really, but it's hard. It's hard because we function in a society where restaurants are a thing. And in order to change that conversation, you can't just like be like, okay, well, I'm not going to be that thing anymore, because people expect a restaurant to be that thing, and therefore, if you're not, well, just go to a different restaurant, So if you just think about the restaurant industry on its surface, it's just not very sustainable in general. And for better or for worse, one thing that COVID really did is kind of open people's eyes to that, I think, and force a conversation about it. And also to force, some necessary change in an industry where people work long hours, they don't make very much money, there's lots of toxicity. And, those things it's always been really important to me. One of the reasons I left fine dining, and what I wanted to do was build something that existed for the community that we were in. And that includes very much the people who work at Coquine.
Yeah. All right, let's take a quick break here. And when we come back, we're going to talk about what needs to change so that the restaurants we love can keep their doors open. So So like what do you think it would take for you guys to feel comfortable? I mean, aside from just like would it be more customers? Would it be an expansion? I
Um,
don't know, you know.
no, no. Oh no, we're so dizzy.
You're just like, look, we just stopped spinning.
Yeah.
This is good. Don't make us think anymore.
No. So the market works, and I'm not super worried about it anymore. The restaurant, we need to be able to open for more days, so we need to be able to staff more days. We have many struggles, like we do.
Yeah.
It's hard. I'm not gonna lie, honestly, Claudia. Like 2022 was a hard year. It was harder than 2020 for me. Like it.
What?
Yeah, it's been really rough. And for so many reasons and so many things. The supply chain issues were really, we had, oh my gosh, we struggled with like our malfunctioning ovens for over a year. People couldn't get parts to fix them. We couldn't even buy I was just like, fine, I'll buy a new oven. You couldn't get an oven. But staffing is certainly the biggest challenge.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you'll see, well, you maybe don't see it so much anymore, but often we'd see people being like, we're closed tonight. We just don't have enough staff to run dinner, or we're closed for lunch.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You know, we just don't. And we had a lot of that, which is part of the sustainability thing. You know, it is. It's like part of our business being sustainable is not burning out the people who are like the key players, and
right.
Or anybody, not burning out anybody. And you know, I remember one time I had a boss who told me that in restaurants you're not making any money unless you're getting your ass kicked.
That's so sad.
It's so sad, but it's also true. You know, that's why we cut people when we're slow. We got to get people off the clock. Like you can't, otherwise you bleed money, because we don't run with these like, you know, safety nets that most businesses run with, where if someone calls out sick, it's okay. No, that person is working in that station in the kitchen. And if there's nobody to work that station, then how do you run dinner service?
Yeah,
you know,
you're a little screwed.
You're a little screwed.
Should we just put it out there? Coquine is hiring. Obviously, your boss would be Katie, and she's awesome.
Oh, thanks.
Something to think about.
I'm going to put it out there that Coquine and pretty much every other restaurant in Portland and the world is hiring. So pick one.
Okay. Any advice for hope for people who want to start restaurants? Would it be just don't? Would that be the advice? Or
no? You know, I've spent a lot of time over the past couple of years really like worrying about our industry, you know, like being like, well, what if restaurants it just turns out that's not a thing that can happen, because people don't want to pay what it actually costs to run a sustainable restaurant, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's real. That's a conversation we need to be having. But
right.
I think my advice would be focus on sustainability, you know, and focus on that from day one. Don't say, well, it's going to be like this for a little while, but it'll get easier, because we all say that. You have to focus on profitability, because obviously unprofitable businesses don't survive. But if you can't create a profitable business that's sustainable, like abandon ship, it's not going to work. And you're going to be square peg round holing it for too long. And I think like I've had this thought many other times in my career, because, and I've been a bit outspoken about this, but you know, there's this like the phenomenon of the food festival where chefs are all expected to work for free. We all want exposure, and we all want to, you know, be part of the conversation, because that brings people to our doors, and it does. And that's sad, you know, sad that we're expected to do these things where we work for free just to get people in the door. But for me, I was like, well, your business model is not sustainable. You know, it is not. You need a new business model, because if you can't just pay the people who are working your event, what are you doing?
I love this. I'm seeing the connection. So you're basically saying capitalism isn't going to do it for you.
Yeah.
So if you're going to open up anything, value your time.
Yes.
Make sure it's sustainable, and make sure to help out those around you, like your actual staff, because they're the ones who help build you up.
And you know, Claudia, I realize that like it may sound like I'm preaching from a place of privilege, because we have, you know, we're 8 years in, and things are certainly a lot easier for us now. But you know, we provided health insurance for our employees less than a year after we opened. And we have a completely pooled house, for example, so our kitchen gets a good share of the tips. So there's a lot of things that we focused on from the very beginning, of ways to make things more sustainable. And I just don't think it's impossible. Let me put it that way. And I do think that if more businesses saw it that way and made that effort, it would become more commonplace, and it would become easier for everybody to do it, because it would be it would just be the way things are, and people would need to charge the price that requires, you know. You know, the point is that restaurants are special. They're special. Like, having somebody cook you dinner and clean up after you, that is special. Like,
Yeah.
that shouldn't be something that is cheap, or that comes at, you know, and I kind of don't think it's something that should be an everyday thing.
Yeah.
It's, you know, and there's a place in the world for like the grab and go sandwiches, of course. Yes. But those things also should support the people who like make the ham that you put on the sandwich and bake the bread. And like, if that isn't sustainable, then we're just feeding this vicious cycle of, you know, of people showing up and doing a job that's undervalued and not getting paid enough to pay their bills, like, which I don't want to be a part of.
Well, Katie, I'm really glad that we got to chat. I've been curious about how things are going, and I'm glad to hear that they're going well.
Thank you, Claudia.
And now for your microdose of news. New data shows that Oregon's unhoused population grew by 23% between 2020 and 2022. The survey also shows that Oregon has the highest percentage of unhoused families with no shelter at all. That means they're most likely living in a tent or a car. And none of the 5 members of Portland City Council have ruled out a run for mayor next year. That includes current mayor Ted Wheeler, who, if he did run, would be seeking a 3rd term. When the city's form of government changes next year, yes, hooray, every single elected office in Portland will be up for election, leaving our current city commissioners with the choice of whether to run for the new city council or mayor or nothing at all. For even more local news and events, sign up for our daily newsletter, Hey Portland. We'll throw a link in the show notes. That's all for today here on CityCast Portland. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.